Welcome to the Transportation Committee meeting of Wednesday, September 14th, 2011. I'm the chair, Bill Rosendahl, and I'm joined by Mr. Parks and Mr. Weezer. We have a quorum, and the meeting will begin. I have two speaking cards, but they're both for item number 5, so we'll hold those there at this point. Please read item number 1.
Item number 1 is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Mr. Sergio Siderman to the Board of Taxicab Commissioners for the new term ending June 30th, 2016.
Come on up. Mr. Sergio. There he is. Okay.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Tell us a little bit about your background.
I'm a lawyer. I've been working in downtown since 1998. I worked at some big firms, Foley and Lardner. I was a litigator there. I now have my own firm in downtown LA, and I've been on the Taxicab Commission for 4 years. It's been a good experience. We've helped a lot of people. We've run into some complicated issues in the last year and a half, 2 years, and I think overall the Taxicab Committee's done a good job, and I'm happy to be a part of it.
Thank you very much for that. We're joined by Mr. Koretz. There's now 4 members of the committee here. What have been the challenges, and what do you see going forward in this role?
That's a good question. Whereas the committee meetings used to be relatively tame and uneventful, they've become more and more heated, particularly with respect to how the taxi business is going to run going forward. There's a lot of tension between the franchises and the drivers. I think some groups have made more out of that tension. I don't think there are certain groups that claim to represent all the drivers or a majority of the drivers, and that doesn't seem to be accurate. But nonetheless, I think that more harmony between the owners and the drivers would be welcome.
What could we do as a committee, as a city, to take that to that level that you described?
Well, you know, the drivers are in a particularly the lease drivers are in a curious position because they're not technically employees, yet the franchise owners in some ways run their companies as if these were employees, and so it's kind of like the realtor conflict where are real estate agents, if they're told by their brokerage what to do, are they still independent contractors or not? You know, they've recently tried to unionize, or you know, I don't know how independent contractors can unionize, but you know, as far as the city goes in helping this process along for the benefit of the city, I think that a more permanent solution to the licensing, whether it's medallions, whether it's a continuance of the franchise system, I think some concrete decision-making along those lines would help everybody.
Well, I appreciate your diplomacy on it. It has been a very touchy situation in the past. Mr. Koretz.
Yeah, just to follow up on that, it's been difficult for me as not a taxi expert, although I've dealt with taxi issues in other cities over the years too. Who really speaks for the employees? I agree there's one group that seems a little more out there that claims to represent more people than I think they really do. But on the other hand, I can't tell whether some of the employees really legitimately feel they're being abused and taken advantage of. There are many that say this is the American dream, and you can see it in some cases where people start out as drivers and now they own their own cabs, and they have multiple cabs. They drive one. They have people working with them that drive others. There are others that claim that they're not successful and they're making very little money. And how do we tell where the reality is?
That's a fantastic question. And, there was an article published by some UCLA professors that painted a grim picture of the taxi drivers' lives in Los Angeles. And, as I read through that article, I didn't find it to be entirely accurate in terms of depicting what these drivers go through. It is definitely not an easy job. It is dangerous, and it requires a lot of hard work, but there are a lot of people waiting in line to become taxi drivers, and it's not because you lose money at it. It is a profession where people do earn good money, and part of our job is to make sure that the people that are admitted are qualified and are people that are in the best interest of the city of Los Angeles to be drivers. We deny a lot of applications for drivers. I mean, it's not easy to get a taxi driver's license, and it's highly sought after. So your point as to how do we determine exactly, I think it's going to require more in-depth analysis. At the taxi committee, we've got excellent staff, and even though they've, for budget reasons, had to downsize, they still do an unbelievable job. Their research capabilities are really exceptional, and the work product they produce has made life a lot easier for us. So as long as we can continue to rely on them to provide this information, we can convey it to you and give you a better picture of what's going on. So I think that's something on our agenda for the next couple of sessions, that we need to get a better picture of the reality out there. Because right now I don't think that the voices speaking up are representing everyone.
No, I think that's true. And the article, I think, probably is extreme, although there may be some people that are having those bad experiences. The fact that lots of people want these jobs, I don't think answers the question either, because right now people will line up for minimum wage jobs, and even if they don't make much money, people are lining up for these jobs because some people do, and they may wind up making $8 an hour, even though some people are doing better. I don't know how much of that has to do with who they're working for, how good they are at marketing their service, how aggressive they are at taking calls. I mean, there's all kinds of questions. It's very hard as a bottom line to tell whether people are being treated fairly or not. So any way that you can find to get more of a handle on that and give us a true picture, I'm sure would be appreciated. The only other thing, and just sort of passing thought with the industry, with the cost of fuel, I don't know if we're fair enough to the cabs in terms of having any flexibility in adjusting the rates. So they may have the same rates when gas is $3.50 a gallon as when it's $5 a gallon. None of us have any control over that, and yet when it's $5 a gallon, it becomes much less economically sound to operate a cab. So I don't know if we should build in a little more flexibility based on fuel costs. So.
There is a fuel surcharge that they can apply when certain gas prices hit a certain trigger, but unfortunately that tends to take away from their tip, which is a big part of their income, So while there is some accommodation for rising fuel costs, I think that there's still work to be done to alleviate that on the drivers.
Yeah, I would agree. So if we could take a little more look at that too,
Will do.
that'd be good. Thank you.
Mr. Weezer. Mr. Parks.
Let me just ask, a couple of years ago, there was a request for a study to evaluate a lot of the concerns that were brought up by cab drivers and those who represent them. Do you know the status? Has that ever been completed? I know that it was started, and then they had to back off of it, and they were going to restart it, but I've not seen the end result or whether that's still in process.
Well, I'll have to get back to you on that because I don't know the status. I do know the study that you're speaking of, and it was unfortunate that it was cut short. It was costly to cut it short because work had been done, and then issues were raised about the authors of the report, and so I know that we're moving in the direction of taking the work that was done and completing the issues and answering the questions that the report was supposed to handle, but I can't give you an accurate answer right now as to where exactly we are in that process. I know that it's high on the agenda to get completed.
Okay. I would just ask if you could track that down, because I know it's been quite a while from the inception of the report and then the cancellation and then the restart, and I think there was a conflict as to whether there was sufficient money to do the entire study. But if we can get that done and get that before the committee, I think it would be important.
I agree. Will do.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have a motion to move forward with this? So moved. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Thank you very much for stepping up again.
Thank you all. Have a good day.
Item number 2.
Item number 2 is a communication from the mayor relative to the reappointment of Ms. Grace Yu to the Board of Transportation Commissioners for the new term ending on June 30th, 2016.
Come on up. Ms. Grace,
Committee?
you here? Here. Not here? Not here. When is she scheduled before council?
John White, City Clerk. Ms. Yu is scheduled for council Friday, 16th.
Do we have any reason or knowledge of why she isn't here?
Yeah.
How urgent is it that we approve this on Friday?
Friday is the last day for council to act.
Last day to act.
Yes, it is.
Well, we're going to report her out of committee without a recommendation, and we look forward to her using the opportunity of the city council chambers to talk with all of us about why we should put her on the commission and all that kind of thing. And I'd like to know by Friday why she isn't here. Okay, that's item number 2.
Item number 3 is a communication of the mayor relative to the appointment of Mr. Dana Perlman to the Board of Transportation Commissioners for a term ending June 30th, 2012, to fill the vacancy created by the resignation of Mr. John Frierson.
Good afternoon. Thanks for coming here. Tell us a little bit about your background and what this commission will mean for you.
Sure. I'm an attorney in private practice. I have my own firm. I have been on the board of the Human Rights Campaign for the past 12 years, very active in LGBT politics and advocacy. I have been serving for the past few months on the National Finance Council for the Obama campaign, where I'm also co-chairing the LGBT committee. And I've, for many years, I've been part of the informal mayor's breakfast with LGBT leaders in the community. I have not held a role. I've wanted to hold a role, and this was something that was presented to me as an opportunity. I've wanted to give back to the city. I'm a native Angelino, born in Covina, but I've lived here my whole life pretty much since then. So I'm very much looking forward to serving on the commission.
And I appreciate that. Colleagues, I met with this gentleman a little bit before the meeting, and needless to say, I was extremely impressed with his background and his interest and his energy. And I have no more further questions. Mr. Koretz.
No questions. We've known each other for many years. He's very bright and capable, and I think will be a great commissioner.
Mr. Parks.
No, I just want to thank you for stepping up. The two things I'd ask if you can keep an eye on that we are constantly looking at is in this current year's budget, it will be the second year that we'll be going through the 5-year plan, in which DOT has put together a plan to pay particular attention to infrastructure and our revenue projections and issues. And it's important that as we look at the budget, that second year of that 5-year plan is implemented, and that they create a 6-year so that we have a rolling 5-year plan at all times. The other one is, I understand that LADOT is going through a process for RFP on our parking lots, and we'd like to make sure that that does not hit a snag and we can move forward on at least getting some idea of what kind of revenue projection would be available on our parking lots.
I will definitely look out for those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Weezer.
Thank you.
Again, well, we thank you very much for your service here on many levels, and the gay background drop also I'm greatly appreciative of, and as I said to you in our meeting there, your leadership in community is greatly appreciated by all of us in the gay community, in the national political world, and now coming into the city and working on some tough issues in transportation. Thank you very much for stepping forward. Have a motion, Mr. Kratz?
So moved.
Okay, unanimous by the committee. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Friday?
Mr. Perlman is scheduled for council, or will be scheduled for council on Wednesday, September 28th.
Wednesday, all right, great. We'll see you then. Take care. Thank you. Next item, item number 4.
Item number 4 is a CAO report relative to a DOT contract with Illium Associates for an amount not to exceed $11.6 million and a term of 5 years for transit advertising, marketing, customer service support.
Come on up.
Angela Berman, CAO.
Yeah, you know, I think I have Dennis Hathaway all the time in my district, who's about signage and all that. So when you go through this, please help me with the advertising aspect of this and how this works. But go ahead, tell us.
Okay, the CAO report before you recommends approval of the department's request to enter into contract with Illium Associates for a period of 5 years. And services in this contract include the ongoing management of the transit store in the Civic Center, and as-needed advertising and marketing strategies to distribute the transit information to potential customers. Compensation for this contract over the 5-year period will not exceed a total of $11.6 million, and funding for this contract is budgeted annually in the city's Proposition A fund, and funding is available this fiscal year for this purpose. Future year funds are subject to availability in future year budgets.
There's an RFP that went out, right?
Yes, they were selected through a competitive process.
There were 2 of them
Correct.
in the process. Okay.
Yep. Phil Aker from Department of Transportation. In this program, we tried in the RFP to stress that this is really not advertising in the way that we normally think of it, to buy billboards, to take a local television ad. Really what we're talking about is we're the second largest transit operator in LA County. We have a dedicated ridership, and we pride ourselves on communication with the riders. And Illium is the current contractor. We selected them primarily for their excellence in transit marketing. They're a firm that are dedicated to that particular niche market. They've helped us out in ways that I couldn't have even thought of to put in the RFP. We're buying 84 compressed natural gas buses for Commuter Express. We have to decorate or market, identify our new buses. We don't have any experience in doing that. We have, I think, something that's going to be very eye-catching and promote the city of Los Angeles. Illium is a woman and minority-owned firm. It's a specialist in transit marketing, as I said. It's a compact organization, and we use them only when we need their services. So this is an as-needed contract. It's not go away and do a project and come back with the results. We're in constant contact with them the firm is located in Bellevue, Washington, but we're in constant contact with them by email and by phone. And then the two principals of the firm come to Los Angeles each month and meet with the Transit Bureau to promote our transit program. And that's Commuter Express Dash and the City Ride program and the charter bus program. We felt that this was a cost-effective proposal. Illium has rates that are similar to other agencies in the transit marketing business. The four principals have top salaries of $175 an hour, and they initially proposed in the RFP, in the proposal that when they responded, to cut those 10% in the first year, and subsequently offered to cut them for the first 3 years. So it saved Prop A money. The rates for the rest of the staff are competitive with other transit marketing firms. As I said, we tried to throw everything in the RFP that we possibly could think of, but for an example, after we did the line-by-line analysis to deal with a $23 million deficit, we had a technical consultant, TRB, do our analysis, and we said, this is a good report, but nobody's going to understand it. And so we essentially turned to Illium and said, can you turn this into something that people who ride our services and policymakers can understand? And they did an admirable job. As part of that process, there's a thing called a Title VI report, and that's to examine the impact. It's a federal requirement to examine the impact of service changes and fare changes upon minority and low-income communities. They turned that around in, I think, 48 hours. I mean, really an amazing job. That wasn't in the RFP because we didn't know we needed it. The bulk of the staff that we pay is located here in Los Angeles. We operate the transit store across the street in the LA Mall. We have 4 full-time people over there, and Illium has a person who actually is headquartered out of the store and does outreach to employer firms. They also use subcontractors within Los Angeles minority firms, and they hire local people for things like onboard surveys. So a lot of the money, and then we also print all our materials through the city print shop. So we feel that this is an effective choice.
Are they here today?
Yes.
Can you come up for one quick second? We've heard of Santa Monica's Blue Bus, and we've heard a lot of constituent concerns about the digital signage they were putting on or potentially advertising kinds of situations. Explain what you do for us for this contract.
What we do?
Your name for the record, too.
My name is Carolyn Perez Anderson, and I'm the president of Illium. What we do is market research, behavioral type research, finding out why people want to ride or don't want to ride the bus. We provide graphics for you in terms of branding, maps, schedules, any of the advertising pieces that you might need, newspaper ads. We've done some TV spots for you, etc. And as Phil said, we also do signage, like the bus stop signs and things like that.
Great. Well, we really appreciate what you do, and I know we have a special transportation committee that will be talking about that item 8 on advertising. I just wanted to, on the record, get your comments. No more questions from me. Mr. Weezer.
Yes. At first glance, this does seem pretty pricey, and it's a 5-year contract, and we are in huge need not only to cover our deficit, but there's a huge demand for our Dash services. And so I ask myself, as I look at this, not knowing the intricacies of what goes on, the marketing, the pamphlets you provide, et cetera, I ask myself, well, can we better use our money instead of doing more marketing and this type of administrative work to put out to operational use for our consumers? And it's about 2-point-something million a year, correct? That's what it comes out to?
The FY 11-12 budget, I believe, is approximately $2.2 million.
It's about 2.2 million. 1.6 million of that is reserved for the advertising component, whereas the other half, or the other portion, is reserved for the management of the transit store.
I also want to point out that amount for the marketing is a not-to-exceed amount. It's not a fixed-price contract. So, as Phil mentioned, we only pay them for what we ask them to do. So if we don't ask them to do work, we're not going to pay them. So oftentimes we don't come close to the budget amount. It varies on a year-to-year basis depending upon what issues we're dealing with.
How much, on average, was on carryover from previous years on this contract? Because we've had this for about 5 years, correct? And how much did we allocate for the previous contract? The same amount of money or 10% more since we...
I'm sorry, what's the last part?
The 5-year contract that just expired, how much was that?
Last fiscal year, the advertising portion was 1.5 million, as opposed to this current year, it's 1.6. So it's just a slight cost of living adjustment.
Just for example, in fiscal year 9-10, we actually spent $750,000 on marketing and $540 on the transit store. So that was significantly less than the budget amount. So like I said, if there's not a lot going on, we won't probably spend the full amount. But last year, we went through a lot of changes. As Phil mentioned, we had to cut a lot of service. We had to raise fares. We had a lot of coordination with the riders, and Phil gave a couple examples where Illium's assistance is essential. If you don't have good marketing outreach, and again, it's not traditional advertising, it's more customer support. If you don't have good customer support, you have riders that aren't aware of changes in service, fares, information about how to use the service, things like that, and it can result in a significant reduction in ridership. We hit a target of 30 million riders a year, I believe, in 07-08, which is about a 250% increase over the previous 5 years. So I think that's an example of how having good customer support and a good marketing team is integral to increasing ridership, which is really the goal of providing the program. So we're very happy with the work that Illium does, and we believe that it's a critical element of our overall transit program.
Okay, so you feel comfortable in the ones who manage this operation, that instead of putting more money into actual operations to...
Well, you also want to make sure the service that you're running is running effectively as well. And as Phil said, we don't hire a firm to go spend tons of money on billboards and TV spots and radio spots. Because we're more of a niche operator, unlike MTA, we have some service here and some service here and some service here. It wouldn't be cost effective to spend a lot of money on a bells and whistles marketing campaign. So we're very much oriented toward cost-effective strategies, working with community groups and employers, customer groups, very much targeted marketing, very cost-efficient in our approach. So we're not recklessly spending money on full-blown marketing campaigns that aren't very effective, and that's one of the advantages of hiring a firm like Illium as opposed to a firm that's not dedicated to transit, which when we first started back in the late 1980s, we had more of a public relations type firm that didn't have that transit experience. And a lot of it was trial and error and was spending a lot of money on things and seeing if they were effective. But if you have a firm that is familiar with transit and what works and what doesn't work, you can more cost effectively put things into place that are more likely to work from the get-go and save money that way as well. So that's an advantage of hiring a firm like Illium.
And they're cheap.
Yeah.
Actually, we're cheap. We try to be very, very careful.
And that gives me more comfort because when we're trying to just simply survive as a service.
Yeah.
And when I read this, I thought we're going to go out and do marketing, advertisement. I'm saying we don't have the money to do that. This is for basic, more customer service,
Right.
targeted approach to make sure that those who are using the services know how to get the service and get the attention they need.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
I think it's helpful to compare what we actually spend, I mean, what, in round numbers, what are our total expenses per year?
Well, like as I mentioned, I think we spent
For the whole operation.
our transit budget overall is in excess of $100 million a year. So we have as I mentioned, we have the second largest transit operation in LA County. So some of these are really essential services for our riders.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Mr. Parks? I was wondering, what do we use, or what kind of criteria do we use to just evaluate how well the message is being received, how well people understand it and things of that nature? What do we do in that regard?
Well, one of the things we do is we have an onboard survey for our riders, and we ask them detailed questions about the various aspects of the operations, including our marketing program, and how well are we getting information out to our riders about the program and changes to the program and attracting new riders. So we scored very well in that category, and overall, our customers, as you may have heard, our satisfaction rating on the entire program is about 90%, which is among the highest satisfaction rate in the country, and the marketing aspect of the survey was about that same level, about 90%. So that's
And that
one.
90% is satisfaction as to the operation of the bus service?
Both the operation of the service as well as the customer information, customer support function.
And then let me ask, in the sense of other than survey, do we do any other kind of outreach to get input from the community as to what they might need that we may not be providing? How do we go about that?
We meet with community groups, meet with rider groups. We're always talking to them about potential changes in services and how we can get our message out better. And that's one of the jobs that Illium has, along with DOT staff, is working with employers and community groups in terms of how to get the information out to them.
Is that part of the survey also?
That's separate from the survey.
All right, thank you.
And I should comment that the transit store actually runs our commendation and complaint process, where riders call in or send in requests for changes, concerns about the service, and that goes both to our contractors, because we contract out all our services, and also to our project managers within the Transit Bureau. So that's an important function, and that gives us a day-to-day finger on the performance of our system.
Thank you.
Yeah, I understand that you've offered a 10% reduction at the request of the city in parts of the contract, as I understand it. How much of the whole contract would that apply to?
The contract, other than what we pay to the print shop for printing, things like that, is pretty much all driven by staff costs. Illium voluntarily, under the current contract, for part of the fourth year and all of the fifth year, agreed to a voluntary 10% reduction when council asked that contractors do that. As part of the new proposal under the new RFP, while they weren't obligated to do so, they had volunteered in the proposal to cut all of their staff rates by 10% for the first year. In discussions with them as part of the evaluation process, they agreed to extend that, not just for the first year, but for the first 3 years of the contract. And that includes all staff rates.
Yeah, I think that's very positive and very responsive, so good to hear.
Great, thank you. Mr. Weezer, do we have a motion to move this? So moved. Okay, unanimous among the committee. Thank you very much. Thanks for stepping up.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 5.
Councilman, did you want to go to the other the advertising contract for DOT, or you
Sure, why
just want to
not?
go? Okay.
Let's move it.
That's, the special, item number 8 is on the special meeting supplemental agenda, and that's the CAO report relative to the proposed amendments with Titan Outdoor to extend the advertising services on city transit vehicles for a period not to exceed 6 months.
Okay, questions. When do you expect the RFP process to conclude and an award recommendation forwarded to the council?
The
Name for the record.
Jim Lefton with the Department of Transportation. The RFP was put out in mid-May approximately. The proposals came in mid-July, July 15th. We received 2 responses. The department is working with an evaluation panel to evaluate the proposals. There was some delay in that one of the firms that submitted a proposal indicated in the proposal that the city has a lawsuit against them dealing with super graphic issues. It was Van Wagner. That was the name of the company. So rather than moving forward with the evaluation, the department erred on the side of caution and coordinated with the city attorney's office to get more information about the lawsuit and determine whether there's any reasons why Van Wagner should not be considered. We have been working over the last 1 to 2 months and getting more information about that. We've got that information now, and we're proceeding with the evaluation. We had a meeting this week to finalize the scores, and the department will be submitting a report to the mayor and council in the very near future.
How much income has the city received from this contract over the past 3 years?
The amount has been growing year by year. This current year, the last year of the contract, we estimate that we'll receive about $660,000. That's the estimate, which is significantly above the minimum annual guarantee, which is only $400,000. So
where does the revenue go from these?
I'm sorry?
Where does the revenue go?
The revenue goes to Prop A. It's generated using Prop A funded vehicles, so it's required to go back into the Prop A account.
So we're basically extending the advertising services for a period not to exceed 6 months?
Yeah, this is just a short-term extension because of the delay that I mentioned earlier. We want to continue to have those revenues come in, so the extension includes all of the existing terms and conditions that the current contract has. Again, this is a contract where they pay us, so there's no cost increases associated with the extension, and we'll be finishing up our report shortly and submitting that to the mayor and council for approval.
Thank you very much for that.
Yeah, I assume that the conditions are no advertising for alcohol, tobacco, political, those conditions existed on the previous contracts, correct? Or the no advertisement for alcohol?
Yeah, that's correct.
Tobacco,
That's correct, yeah.
political?
Correct.
Were those explicit conditions in previous contracts?
It's described in the previous RFP and the current RFP.
Mr. Parks? Mr. Correct. No.
No.
Thank you. We'll
Thank
move
you.
forward with this.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Paul? Shall we go to number 5?
Sure. Item number 5 is a Rosendahl-Koretz motion instructing DOT and the Bureau of Engineering and Street Services to assist with the development of a neighborhood traffic protection plan associated with the Killroy Realty Corporation's construction of the West Side Media Center.
Okay, what I'd like to do is have staff give a quick report, and then the community cards respond to it, and staff comes back up again, okay? So staff, tell us what this is all about right now, item number 5.
Good afternoon, council members. I'm Pauline Chan from the Los Angeles Department of Transportation. I've been working with the council office district number 11, your staff, as well as the previous council members' staff on this project for quite a while. This stems from a development project at 12100 West Olympic Boulevard, for which conditions approved by the City Council impose the requirement that the developer provide $250,000 to fund the development and implementation of a neighborhood protection plan in the West LA neighborhood. The money was set aside by the developer, and DOT has the role of, in a sense, being the accountant for the money and to play a secondary supportive role for any consultation that the community and the council office required in development of a plan, specifically of a neighborhood protection plan. Specifically, the conditions approved by the council said the developer shall guarantee $250,000 and that a neighborhood protection plan should be developed and implemented by a community committee and the 11th Council District in consultation with DOT. And that these funds are to be used for basically traffic calming measures and parking measures in a residential neighborhood west of the 405 freeway. And that the conditions also allow that the committee could use these funds to hire an independent consultant to develop the plan. So where we are today, well, I should still say that to date this committee has formed. It actually started meeting back in 2000, and there had been more recent meetings in which the developer had participated in, and the committee, the community, and the committee and the council office are ready to move forward to expend these funds, and the council district office intends to hire a consultant to develop the plan. Therefore, the motion would request council to authorize that the $250,000 be allocated to these different functions. Included in that is the committee's desire for DOT to help them analyze the existing stop sign pattern in the neighborhood and to make recommendations for additional stop sign patterns. Therefore, the motion requests that as $51,000 approximately be sent to, or be kept by DOT to work on the stop sign studies. The motion also asks that the money be moved to CD11 office funds so that the committee, the communities committee, would be able to hire a consultant to develop the neighborhood protection plan. There are also supplemental documents dating back to the previous council office that basically corroborates with the current proposal to move forward with the use of these monies for these purposes. Those supplemental documents are being submitted to your committee members for consideration as well.
Thank you for that very much. Does Building and Safety or City Planning want to add anything to it at this point? Okay, fine. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I should mention that there is urgency in moving this along because the project conditions that the City Council approved also stipulated that the city has to return these funds within 5 years or 5 years after the final certificate of occupancy is issued by the City Department of Building and Safety. So we are coming upon that date. Which
when is that date?
That expiration date would be July of 2012.
Okay. Thank you for that. Could we ask, and just stay on the side there if we could, Liz, how do you say your last name, Liz? Yeah. Well, I know it's another name as well.
Yeah.
Okay.
I kept my last name.
Go for it.
Good afternoon, council members. Liz Smagala from Jeffrey Mangles here today on behalf of Killroy Realty. My client is the one who has the project that was approved in 1998 and had this condition tied to it. Unfortunately, we were just made aware that this item was going to be before you about an hour ago. I rushed here from Century City, and I am pleading with your sense of fairness that you continue this matter for 2 weeks. There's a lot of issues to discuss here. There's been a lot of back and forth on this between our client, LADOT, the bank, and Councilmember Rosendahl, your office. As a preliminary matter, I just told you this project was approved in 1998. These bonds were posted in 99 and 2000. Our client had a certificate of occupancy in 2003. This condition is tied to expiring 5 years from the final certificate of occupancy. So for a few years, our client has maintained that access to these funds has actually expired. Nevertheless, it's been trying to work with the city and work with LADOT to figure out a solution where the block, the community block described in this condition is given access to some or all of these funds. And they've been working with you in good faith. They've been copying you on all the correspondence with everyone. And to just find out about this hearing 2 hours ago and rush here from Century City, again, I'm just trying to appeal to your sense of fairness, of the city trying to be a little bit more business friendly here. I mean, this is a major landowner, developer, landlord in the city of LA. This project was approved 13 years ago. And our client has a lot of issues here that they'd like to communicate with you about, and they'd like to reach an amicable resolution to these issues. Councilmember Rosendahl, I know they tried to reach you directly just now. The principal is in Europe. I'm asking you for an extension on this matter. I'm asking you for 2 weeks. Ms. Chan just said that it's the city's position that these funds don't expire for another 10 months. So I don't know that 2 weeks is going to matter one way or the other, but it would be the fair thing to do for my client. And again, they have maintained that the access to those funds is expired, and that the city hasn't come up with a plan that fits the language of the condition. So please continue this item.
Okay, first of all, we didn't run the clock until the end, and he will respond to the city attorney on this, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to speak.
Okay.
On August 16th, this is now September 13th or 14th? 14th. Okay, on August 16th, as we were putting this motion together, I called Killroy twice and left messages on his cell phone of this. And in the meantime, Mr. Killroy's office, through the city attorney's office, with your Ben Resnick and all this, all knew about this motion. This is not the first time this motion, maybe you are hearing it for the first time, but Mr. Killroy knew about this. In October, I left him a detailed voice message. I also spoke to his secretary several times and said, please get him on the phone. He never called me back.
His
Earlier
understanding was
today,
that you were calling him about food trucks.
No. Well, I'm sorry. Also, I want you to know, because I want to be very clear about this. They called me from Spain today and said that they're not clear about where the money's going. The motion is very clear where this money does go. In fact, Ms. Chang just outlined what the motion did say. I don't know if you've seen the motion or if you're familiar that $51,500 is appropriated for engineering analysis, $25,000 is appropriated for obtaining the services of an independent traffic engineer, and $173,000 is given to CD11 for the development of neighborhood protection plans. I just want to go that on the record and tell you that, please.
And I want to go on the record that you know that Killroy is represented by counsel, and then it's me and Ben Resnick. Whitney of your office knows us. We were not made aware of this, and I swear to you, John Killroy is not aware of this.
Okay.
Until just now.
Thank you for that. I appreciate that.
Counsel, for the record, this matter was properly agendized last week pursuant to the Brown Act. More than 72 hours notice was given as required under the Brown Act. Your client had an obligation, given the fact that he was contacted several times, to at least check the agenda. If you didn't do due diligence, that's not this council's concern, really.
My client has an obligation to check every agenda in the city in the off chance that there might be
Especially
a
when
motion
you're
related to the
involved
property.
and you've been involved with this for the period that the council member just described. Yes, you did. We properly agendized it under the Brown Act. If you need to read the Brown Act, I would advise you to do so, but this item was properly agendized 72 hours in advance.
Okay.
Also, I've reviewed the contract. The General Manager, Jaime de la Vega, asked me to look at the contract. The contract that you signed clearly states that it is the last certificate of occupancy given by the Department of Building and Safety that triggers the 5-year period. The Building and Safety can come up here and testify that that last certificate of occupancy was issued on July 11th, 2007, meaning that the expiration date doesn't occur until July 11th, 2012.
I understand that issue, and I have a lot to say about that issue, and that is part of why I'm asking you to continue the item. I've done research into the dates of occupancy for every single tenant in this building. The building was fully occupied by 2005. I have maintained that that last certificate of occupancy that you're talking about is an error, and it's tied to a different building. I have done a lot of research on this. I've worked with a lot of people at Building and Safety. What I haven't had a chance to do is to communicate with you about it. I don't need a lecture about the Brown Act, sir. I've been practicing law for 8 years. I am telling you from my heart, I did not know about this hearing, and my client did not know about this hearing, and I'm asking for more time to address these issues. That's it.
Okay, thank you for that. We have 2 more public comment cards here, Tom Donovan and Jay Handel. And I might say that Tom Donovan is on the West LA Protection Committee. I see that there. Would you?
That's correct. My name is Thomas Donovan. I live on Federal Avenue in West Los Angeles. I am an elected board member of the West LA Neighborhood Council. Just last week, I was also confirmed as a member of the West LA Area Planning Commission. However, I'm not wearing either of those 2 hats today. I'm wearing the hat of the West LA Neighborhood Protection Plan Committee. I do want to let you know that we have other committee members that could not be here today due to illness, and one of them's at the airport as we speak right now. I do want to acknowledge Priscilla Resendez, who's sitting back there, who is a board member of the West LA Neighborhood Council on our outreach committee, and she will be instrumental in doing the outreach for our neighborhood protection plan. 1998, 1997, maybe, we started negotiations with Killroy regarding the building of the West Side Media Center. We arrived at a $250,000 contribution with a sunset provision after 5 years after the final CFO. As you've heard from the city attorney, that wasn't issued until July of 2007. The former council member for CD11 formed the Neighborhood Protection Plan Committee, and since then we've worked on several measures for our protection plan, including stop signs, retention of a traffic consultant, contributions to LADOT, and even other areas. Right now, our area is choked with traffic. It has been a long time since this project began, and we really need to move forward with the neighborhood protection plan now. The only issue I heard today raised by Killroy involves the 5-year condition, which I think City Council has satisfied that, and we can hear from Building and Safety otherwise. So that's where we are as the Protection Plan Committee is, and I'm happy to answer any questions or respond to any other issues that may be raised by Killroy.
Let me ask you this. It was suggested as a courtesy to extend it for 2 weeks. What's your opinion of that?
Well, we've been talking with Killroy about going forward with this since 2009. And we are running up against the deadline here, and I'm not getting any calls from Killroy. Apparently, council members aren't either. I don't know why we need to wait any longer on this. Everybody knows what the issues are. They've been vetted clearly with the council office, with DOT, with the city attorney's office, and with our neighborhood protection plan committee. Nothing has changed with that regard. This just seems to be pushing things off further for no good reason.
Mr. Handel.
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Jay Handel. I'm the chair of the West LA Neighborhood Council. I also sit on the West Side Neighborhood Protection Plan Committee. This is an ongoing item, and I think the time has come. I understand council asking as a courtesy. I would ask as a courtesy that the half a dozen phone calls that I left for Mr. Justin Smart be returned once. Just 1 out of 6 would have been okay.
Anyway, he's the man who called me from Spain.
Okay. I don't want to make this a long, drawn-out situation, but the facts are clear. Every day this committee doesn't act. Every day the city doesn't seize the money. Every day our neighborhood is impacted by lousy traffic that could be mitigated in some way, shape, and form. And the fact of the matter is, we've done a study. We've looked at intersections. We've looked at Pico Boulevard. We now have mixed use coming in on Pico Boulevard. You have a plan that I just submitted to you that this neighborhood council helped fund along with CD11's office to put in traffic calming measures on Pico Boulevard, where, in fact, we now have mixed use being not just proposed, but being built. The facts are clear. Killroy's project, while they can say, and in meetings with us, they've told us that they don't believe that the traffic spreads as far down as Pico and down to the 405 freeway. Yet they'll fund millions of dollars to stop a project across the street because it has a 10-mile radius of impact. And Killroy's project was over hundreds of thousands of square feet on the most critical intersection of Olympic and Bundy. So the facts are very clear. The council members should see this is very clear. Our city attorney's office has 450 attorneys in it. If they want to sue, which they've threatened because we're going to take the money, let them sue. Take the money, start fixing our streets, give a better quality of life to the citizens and our constituents in West LA. Please take a look at the package. Just for the record, the date is April 2008 when we started working on this project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. Could I have staff come back up again? Oh, you're sitting here. Good for that. Thank you, both of you, for your comments. What would be your problem with a 2-week delay? When is our next Transportation Committee meeting? 28th? And we are locked into that, and that is the next one. Okay. I know it's been frustrating for folks, and I know that Ben Resnick kept doing what he does well, and Liz came up and articulated the position today. What's wrong with 2 weeks?
I think that the issues that the developer representatives had problems with all this time have not changed, and they've been the same issues that were documented in their letters to DOT, to the bank, for the past year and a half. So I think that if you waited another 2 weeks, I doubt very much that there would be a new resolution of these issues. And because of all the research that not only they did, but also Building and Safety did, it is clear what the city's position should be, and had expressed already in writing with regard to the date of expiration of the funds based on the final certificate of occupancy, the issue of the committee, the communities committee needing to take charge and issue these requests to begin this work. That committee has met. We've met that concern that the Killroy has expressed about the committee having not met and having not made these requests. So I don't know what other issues need to be ironed out. I don't think that the outcome would be any different 2 weeks from now.
Ms. Begala, do you want to come up and react to that? Again, for the record, I did leave him messages about this particular issue. I, in fact, had the chairman of the department standing next to me as I had the motion in front of me. And I know Mr. Resnick has ears and eyes and has been engaged with the department forever. I just want to understand what 2 weeks means to you, other than the courtesy you expressed in your comments.
Councilmember, one item. This condition that we're talking about, it states that the applicant here, Killroy Realty, is entitled to attend all meetings and to receive copies of all related correspondence on anything that this Neighborhood Protection Plan Committee is doing. There's some correspondence that was just passed out that I don't recall receiving. I could try our client again in Spain. I don't think they did either. At a minimum, it would give them the opportunity that they were given under this condition to look at and comment on the plan, which is the plain language of the condition, that they're supposed to get the correspondence and be able to comment on it. So if there's this plan in place, at least give them what the city agreed to give them, which is the opportunity to comment on it and the opportunity to communicate with this body. Again, I understand there's been the back and forth between us and but you've all been left out of this. Councilmember Parks doesn't know anything about this. Probably doesn't want to. Councilmember Huizar doesn't. But Councilmember Perez, I know. Gentlemen, I'm pleading with you here. I'd like to at least read what is being proposed, be able to comment on it, and try to reach a resolution with everyone where this money gets spent in the way that it was intended to, and that's what I'm asking for the 2 weeks.
City Attorney, would you respond to that? I mean, have they had ample opportunity on all of these aspects through the process of the last 11 years?
I believe so, but I would like to know, the documents that you have, aren't they actually documents that you've either obtained from Killroy or shared with Killroy in the past?
What you just got, I've never seen, so.
This is from a J handle.
Right, and on behalf of the committee, that's the plan.
He's given it to her before, but this is a citizen directed thing. It's not an official document. No. Please call in.
I don't see anything in the conditions that require that the funds be released by the bank because they're in the form of a bond, that there's no requirement in the guarantee agreement that Killroy signed guaranteeing $250,000. There's no condition in here that stipulates that the developer gets to see this or that before the funds are released. Secondly, the only work that is currently on the table right now is the desire of the committee for DOT to conduct a stop sign pattern study and to implement the stop signs, which is only $51,000, and then to use the rest of the money to first fund the development of a plan. There is no plan that has been officially yet approved by anybody, but there's certainly a lot of ideas for these plans, and I think that the consultant would come in and verify what the details of this plan might be. So the concept has been dreamed of by the committee, but the plan has yet to be solidified. So I think that there's ample time for the developer to review such plans as they come along.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Perez.
Yeah, I really don't know much about this, and it's hard to make heads or tails of what the argument is against it. What I haven't heard, and Mr. Rosendahl has asked several times, and I really didn't hear it, is there any harm in waiting the 2 weeks? And my sense was the harm is we don't feel like waiting 2 weeks. It's been a long time, let's just get on with it. That doesn't seem like much harm. So for me to actually give the person objecting a chance to gather the information that she needs to gather together and make a coherent presentation in 2 weeks seems pretty logical. I mean, we well may, after all this time, and I know nothing about the issue really, other than what little was in our report. We may say, well, it doesn't make any sense, and just ignore it. But if there is some merit to it, I don't see why we wouldn't wait the 2 weeks unless there's actually some deadline we're missing or some real harm. Just seems like a common courtesy if something real is at stake.
Mr. Chair. I mean, it's your district, and I give full deference to you on this item, and as the chair of this committee, also give you some deference. At the same time, you've been asking for this developer's attention, and you've got it. And all they're asking for is 2 weeks to say, okay, you got our attention, you've been trying to reach us, you got it. I see no harm in waiting for those 2 weeks, although it's been a long process. Sometimes when deals are to be made or when you're going to finalize an issue, it gets to that point where this is it, no ifs, ands, or buts, and I think you're up at that point. In 2 more weeks, I don't think there's much harm in that to wait for those 2 weeks and get it done, but I give full deference to you on this matter, whichever direction you'd like to go.
I would like to see if we could do the best of both worlds. If we leave it here for 2 weeks, it won't get the council for a month. I would hope that we could move it and and schedule it for 2 weeks in council. And during that 2 week period, the staff and the lawyers can work out their differences, and it's scheduled 2 weeks, date certain in council.
So basically, what you're saying is approve it out of committee today, and there's a 2 week period to modify it before it goes to council?
We asked the clerk to set it for a 2 week date
How does the
certain.
city attorney feel on that legally?
I think that would be a wise move. I would want to hear from the department regarding how long it would actually take to implement. I'm concerned that if we get closer to that deadline, they may not be able to do the actual things they need to do to implement the procedures they need to follow in order to obtain and use the money prior to that deadline.
I think we're already very much short of time, so 2 weeks is basically 2 weeks less. It's hard for me to say that it's going to make a project fail or succeed, but it's less time. It just puts more pressure on the department.
If I may, next week is a council recess week, so by de facto, the schedule, the soonest this could go to council, if the committee does act today, would be the week of September 26th. So you could approve it today and go to council either Tuesday the 27th or Wednesday the 28th.
Sounds good to me.
Well, what I think we should do is show 2 more weeks, continue the item, not act on it today, but make it very clear that when we meet on the 29th,
28.
Unless...
28. 28.
28. Unless the city attorney comfortably feels that Mr. Killroy's strategy can work through with Mr. Parks' suggestion. Mr. Parks' suggestion is approve it out of committee today, and there is time to sit down and work through if there is an issue that then goes before the full council on the 27th.
I think that is adequate time.
That is adequate time? And in your past experience with situations like this, does that make it work?
Yes. I believe so. I think your problem is that you're coming too close to the deadline.
There's no deadline.
There certainly is. There's a
The
July
funds
11th.
expire in 10 months, according to the city.
Oh, you can come on up. You can come back up. Jay, it's okay if you felt a need. Just, we want to move to the next item, but go ahead. I certainly respect you for that.
I'm sorry, having the developer's attorney sit up here and have a dialogue with you while the rest of us who are not getting paid hundreds of dollars an hour are coming down to protect our own neighborhood is absolutely wrong. They get 2 minutes and they get out. And you guys need to make a decision. But it's absolutely wrong what you're doing here. You're sitting here making us sit and listen to a debate where you're compromising with the developer. Either make a decision or send us home, but certainly don't leave us out in the cold who are getting paid to drag ourselves down here at 2:30 in the afternoon so that she can sit here and convince you, I need 2 more weeks to continue to screw around with something we've been doing for 5 years. I'm sorry.
All right, well, you're compelling enough, so we're going to take the motion forward and approve it today. I'd like to get a vote from my colleagues, and this will not continue the item, Ms. Magala, but it will take a vote on it, and there is a period between now and the 26th, as the city attorney said, that any issues can be worked out. Do I have a second for that motion, Mr. Parks? Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous by the committee. We have approved the motion. We're moving forward with it.
And what, excuse me, Mr. Chair, what date in council did you want to hear that, the 28th, Wednesday?
If we can do that on the 28th, is that sufficient time for the city attorney?
Yeah, I mean, basically, the issue, from what I understand, is between the Department of Building and Safety and them establishing that July 11, 2007 was the date. And once they do that...
Could you just say that for the record, please?
Jim Tokunanga, I'm actually with the Department of City Planning, but we're the ones that issued a memo clarifying that the date was July 11, 2007. There were 2 certificate of occupancies issues, one in 2003 and 2007, and we are using the 2007 date. I was in conversations with Building and Safety, and I do have the certificate of occupancy in my files.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. We'll now move on to the next item. Thank you very much, everybody, on that particular issue there.
That brings us to item number 6, which is a Englander Cardenas Garcetti motion requesting that the city attorney, with assistance of DOT, prepare an ordinance to allow the city to regulate advertising signs on motor vehicles parked or left standing upon a public street, and establishment of a minimum distance of the vehicle that must be moved after 72 hours as outlined in Assembly Bill 1298.
Great. Staff, come up for this real quick.
I think I'm the staff on this one.
Pardon me?
I believe I'm the staff on this
Okay.
one.
The mobile billboard industry is really good at finding loopholes in legislation, and so we're back again with the new legislation to close these loopholes. Could the city attorney give us a brief overview of AB 1298? Has the governor taken action on AB 1298?
It's on the governor's desk awaiting his signature. It overwhelmingly passed in both the Senate. I believe it only had 3 nay votes, and overwhelmingly in the Assembly. The governor has until October 9th to pass it. It would take effect on January 1st, 2012. So we do have some time here to get it passed within council because it wouldn't be effective, our local ordinance, until January 1st, 2012. And this was, we amended this. It was a city attorney initiated item through the Assembly member Blumenfield's office. We wanted to close some of the loopholes that Lone Star and some of the other companies that were still putting these things out there were doing. For instance, Lone Star was taking the wheels off the trailers and calling them sleds, saying that they were exempt from the vehicle code. So the state legislature, I went up and testified in Sacramento, as I did the previous ordinance, and convinced the Senate that they needed to close these loopholes. And they have redefined Section 395.5 of the Vehicle Code to read, a mobile billboard advertising display means an advertising display that is attached to a mobile, non-motorized vehicle, device, or bicycle that carries, pulls, or transports a sign or billboard and is for the primary purpose of advertising. When I was in Sacramento, I had them insert the word device just to a broad term so that we didn't have sleds or any other thing that they come up with out there. Also, one of the problems we had here in Los Angeles is that we were stuck with the 72-hour law. We wanted to change that down here, and they have done that in Sacramento and waiting the governor's signature. Under the new proposed law, we will have the ability here in Los Angeles to set the time that if one of these mobile billboards can park on our streets and the distance they must move that trailer. So in the future, the council is going to have to make findings as to what a reasonable time is, whether that's an hour or 2 hours, and the distance that that the trailer needs to be moved. Under our old ordinance, we used to have an ordinance prior to 2007 that required that the vehicle be moved at least a mile. Unfortunately, that ordinance was obsolete because we can no longer look at odometers on these motorized that are attached to motorized vehicles. Under the new ordinance, or under the new law, because we can set a time requirement, the city attorney believes that we can require that vehicle to move a mile if council believes that's reasonable, and do not return to that same location where it was parked for at least 24 hours. That way we don't have the, otherwise it'd be impossible for DOT to enforce. They would not know how far the vehicle had actually moved, and they would just bring it back and move the thing an inch the way that they've been currently doing. So I believe those are some of our recommendations that we will make, but council will have to make the ultimate determination.
So first you want the governor to sign something. So
Right, exactly. And just to let you know that Bruce Boyer of Lone Star has already filed an injunction against the
Before you even cite the law.
before the governor's even signed it, so.
Oh, we know the world.
That's where we are with this.
Okay,
So-
you're suggesting that we request that LADOT and city attorney to report back in 30 days.
Right.
With recommendations on time, limit, and distance, guidelines, and we will hold the necessary public hearings at that time.
Yes, yes.
That's the recommendation. Anybody else want to ask any questions, or can we go forward?
This is for those vehicles with signs on them or some advertisement, et cetera. What about just generally the distance on any vehicle? Are we addressing that? You know, as you said, they move them an inch and they've complied with the law, whether they have advertisement or not. When they can't be, they're no longer than 72 hours.
Unfortunately, this really only applies to mobile billboard advertising displays right now. Now, I did add something else that I asked Sacramento to include in the bill, and that was that any motorized vehicle that contained a sign, it had to be permanently affixed on the vehicle, and it could not exceed the height, length, or width of the vehicle. So that if they're advertising, if they decide they want to put signs on top of the cars, they're not going to be able to do that. So at least with what, we didn't want to infringe on somebody who's a business owner putting their business on the side of the car, and that was for those purposes. But we can't control just a regular automobile.
We can't control distance?
Other than the 72-hour law right now, or whatever we have posted on any particular street.
If we did want to control distance on non-advertised.
We would have to go to Sacramento.
You still have to get the legislation
Right.
for Sacramento. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Parks? Correct. Okay, so move. Thank you. 30 days, we'll come back, and we'll see where we're at on the whole issue. Any items left?
Item number 7 is a Rosendahl-Lebon Design Garcetti motion directing DOT to increase the yellow and red traffic signal phases at 32 intersections that are currently part of the photo red light enforcement program.
Very good. We have a couple of public comment cards, but let staff come up real quickly, and I'm going to turn the meeting over to you for 1 second.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Chairman Rosendahl and members of the Transportation Committee. Item number 7 would have us change red and yellow times at the 32 intersections that were formerly enforced through automated means. It would also have us look at the appropriateness of doing that at other intersections throughout the city. In setting yellow times and all red times, we are governed by the provisions of the Vehicle Code, which also makes reference to another document, the California MUTCD, and those are the guidelines that we use. The intent of that is to ensure that there is uniformity of how yellow times and all red times are set throughout the state. The California MUTCD prescribes a table that shall be used. That table is based on 2 primary principles. One, it has to be designed so that it's fair to the motorist and safe for the motorist. It has to be designed so that a motorist can either stop comfortably on the yellow before reaching the intersection or proceed through the intersection before it turns yellow. And there are formulae that develop those figures. And looking at the discretion given to us in the California MUTCD, we are allowed to increase the yellow time, but based only on specific considerations related to the actual speed or the geometry of the intersection or anything that is site-specific, and our discretion ends there. It does not allow us to increase it by a flat amount or arbitrary amount. But I do wish to reassure you that at the 32 intersections where photo enforcement used to exist, we have taken those opportunities to use our discretion to customize the yellow and all red times at those locations to reflect the actual speeds at the intersections and to provide an all red period, which is not required, but something that the city elects to do to make the intersection safer. We have looked at the additional time that provides based on those objective criteria, and the additional time that we provide at the 32 locations varies from 0.9 seconds to 2.6 seconds above the absolute minimum. So we feel when there's a discussion about, well, can't we increase the times, we have already done that, but it's based on the objective criteria that I've described. We've also looked at the 32 intersections and how many people are getting through on the green or yellow and not entering the intersection on red. And then we've taken a look at even the 4 highest intersections of that 32 that have the highest number of red light photo enforcement violations when that program wasn't in effect. And we have determined based on that data that 99.98%, 9.9998 of the motorists who go through that intersection are able to get through before it turns yellow. And we feel that's a very high percentage, before it turns red. And based on that, we feel that that is a demonstration that the timing we put there is effective and appropriate.
Okay, let me just say one thing. I'm not talking about the red light camera issue, but the red lights itself. When I see, and I do a lot of walking, on Venice Boulevard as an example, it's red light, and it goes white so we can walk. Before I can get even halfway through the intersection, I'm almost running out of time on some of them. And I'm a pretty strong guy with long legs, and I'm thinking of people who aren't able to move as fastly as I do. Have we checked the timing, the literal timing of a pedestrian at some of these stops that seem to suggest we don't leave enough seconds? We had a terrible experience, as you and I both know, in one of our parts of my district, where if they had only extended the red light maybe a second or 2 or 3 or 4 seconds more on that particular red light, one of the tragedies we know about wouldn't have happened. And I do personally know when I cross some of these streets, and I'm a big guy, like I said, it says stop sometimes before I even get to the other side. And I think of other people, especially seniors or mothers with a stroller and stuff like that. It helped me with the timing.
It's actually a different issue than the yellow and all red, but they're somehow all interrelated.
That's right.
We time our intersections, again, according to that same manual that I referred to. We've also added the pedestrian countdown feature at all intersections in the city. So we know there had been some confusion that when the flashing hand goes up, it really means if you've entered the intersection, proceed. There's enough time. But if you haven't started, don't enter. And a lot of people misunderstood that to mean I can't start to cross. But we think that in putting in the numbers, I count down 20, 19, 18, that helps to clarify that. But something we did a few years ago when we were standardizing our pedestrian crossing times is we looked at senior centers throughout the city and other locations where we had noticed that maybe people are walking slower. One good example is Farmers Market at 3rd and Fairfax. A lot of seniors go there. And we would do a customized evaluation of the intersection and determine can they get through at the prescribed time or do we need to give them more? And we've adjusted those times throughout the city to reflect that. Now, if there's one we overlook, we'll be glad to take a look at that.
Okay. And I know your recommendation is to hold in committee, but before we go further with my colleagues' questions, I'd like to let the 2 public opinion cards come up first. Jay Beeble and Sherman Ellison. Good afternoon, Jay.
Good afternoon. Jay Bieber, Safer Streets LA, Sherman Oaks Neighborhood Council, and Pedestrian Safety Committee for the City of LA. Mr. Fisher claims that they can't go above these minimums except for certain things. I'd love to see the language in this that basically says they are barred from doing this, okay? Other cities have done this. They have not run into a problem. He's contradicted himself because they are already arbitrarily picking 5 miles per hour at camera intersections to increase the yellow timing. There's nothing that stops them from doing it at other intersections. As far as the all red phase, they're all over the place. There are intersections in which there are a half a second down the road, same exact intersection. The all red is 1.5 seconds. I mean, so what he's saying basically, he's contradicting himself. Okay. Secondly, as far as his comment regarding the all red, the straight through violations at certain intersections, if you have an intersection in which you have a large number of straight through violations, whether it's 2% or 10% of the total people that get through, if at another intersection, which is a similar intersection, you have, say, many less, hundreds less, you have something going on at that other intersection. And the reason that you have a problem is you have a difference between the approach speed, which is the 85th percentile speed, and the posted speed limit. At the intersection with the largest number of straight-through violations, which is Sherman Way and Louise, they have a posted 35. The speed on that road is at least 45. They have a survey that says the 85th is 40. So at the very least, even using their own formula, it should be, if they had implemented that change in speed, which they didn't do, maybe it was a political reason, they just decided not to do it, they would be posting the yellow time at an additional, say, 0.4 of a second, which might reduce those violations if that's what we're concerned about. I'm happy to answer any other questions. Obviously, we've talked a lot on this issue.
Thank you very much.
Just for the record, California Vehicle Code Section 21400 preempts us from implementing anything outside the guidelines as discussed by Assistant General Manager Mr. Fisher. That is the section that he was referring to. We are bound by those guidelines. And in terms of other cities, what we don't know is what they had originally set them at. They may have been below the standard required. So in referring to other cities, that's not really legitimate unless you actually have what they had originally set them to.
Yes, and I do have that information. Okay. I would like to answer that question.
Okay, at another time. Please.
All right, thank you, Mr. Rosendahl and council members. My name is Sherman Ellison. I am an attorney that does traffic ticket defense in the city of Los Angeles. I'm glad to see that in some ways we are in agreement with the Department of Transportation. They are saying that it is appropriate to enlarge the yellow change interval, and they're saying that it's appropriate perhaps to enlarge the delay of the red cross traffic. So I think in principle they're in agreement that by adding time to the yellow change and perhaps delaying the cross traffic, we're decreasing the conflict between people driving through the intersection. So therefore, I think there is some agreement in concept. It's just a question of whether or not it's 1 second per yellow change interval, 1 second per red light extension before the cross traffic. I think that's what the discussion should be. The reference to the manual on uniform traffic control devices. If one reads that carefully, as I have, and I'm sure as Mr. Fisher has, and I'm sure the city attorney, knows that the primary cause of accidents on all streets is the conflict between other vehicles. The delay of the red light another second, the enlarging of the yellow change interval will decrease the conflict from someone who's moving slowly through the intersection versus someone that wants to start up quickly when the light turns green. So the enlarging of the yellow change, the delay of the red will only enhance. It's consistent with what the city is saying, or at least the department is saying. 21455.7C of the vehicle code says that the yellow change interval is only set at a minimum, and that municipalities may set these yellow change intervals at larger time periods.
Do you have another comment you want to make? Because I gave him a little more time.
Well, I'm curious as to what is the actual formula and the criteria being used by the city in a pragmatic sense. For example, if they told you of these 32 intersections, here's what we've enlarged at intersection 1, here's what we've done at intersection 2, so that you have that kind of criteria. Maybe you do have that criteria. and I'm not sure. I haven't
Good
seen
question.
it.
Mr. Fisher, you want to respond to that?
Well, I mean, we certainly have a table here that shows what our yellow time is and all red time, what the minimum state time is, and that type of thing. But our practice regarding all red is to look at, and this is why it can't be an arbitrary amount, is to look at the width of the intersection being crossed. If you're crossing Venice Boulevard, a very wide intersection, you need a little bit more time to clear the intersection. That's based on the speed of traffic to get through the full intersection. And our all red time is based on that width. And looking at the yellow times, the California MUTCD says that you use the posted speed limit. It identifies the factors you use for braking and for reaction time, and it says that you can increase those factors based on other specific situations that are present, such as the 85th percentile speed. Now, an 85th percentile speed is would accommodate a supermajority of the motorists. In many cases, we don't have that speed available to us. You certainly wouldn't have it on a small street, and you only have it on radar-enforced streets. And in some cases, even when you have radar-enforced streets, the speed may have been taken a quarter mile, a half mile away, because it's supposed to be taken not in the influence of the traffic signal. So we use the best data that we have for that.
Right, so as it relates to the 32 intersections, how did you decide what the yellow change interval was if there were no surveys done for that particular street? How did you do that?
Where we believe that the speed limit was somewhat below the 85th percentile speed, we added 5 miles an hour to the posted speed and calculated a conservative value for the yellow time.
That's why I think we're in agreement. You're in agreement with the concept of enlarging the yellow change interval based upon some artificial 5 mile an hour increment, as opposed to 10 mile an hour increment, or as opposed to a 1 second increment. And unfortunately, some of the posted speed limits, as you know, are based upon engineering surveys that are invalid, that have been declared speed traps by judicial officers. So you have an artificially low posted speed limit that sets, therefore, an artificially low yellow change interval that therefore causes this traffic conflict in intersections and more collisions. Sorry for the...
No, it's okay. I feel like that because you can see I allow dialogues in my meetings because that helps us get to the best answer.
Can I just say one thing about very quickly about the width of the intersection? Okay. The statement was, it's based on the width of the intersection, you need more time. Okay? That's absolutely correct. Unfortunately, at the same width intersections, we have a different time, a much lower time down the road than we do at another intersection. Okay? So, yes, it's supposed to be based on the width of the intersection, but it's not even being done that way, and we don't even know what their exact formula. He's simply saying width of the intersection. There is a ITE formula that says how you calculate that. Are they using that formula? Are they shaving off time? We don't even know exactly what the criteria is.
Very good. Did you want to...
There is a document that I wrote. That's one of the reference documents called the Traffic Control Devices Handbook, which prescribes the formulas to be used for that, and we are consistent with that document.
Okay. Mr. Parks.
Just to clarify one thing, since this discussion has started, have you made changes on the 32 intersections, or are they consistent with what has been done in the past? So this motion says that asks for that to be done. Has that occurred?
Before red light photo enforcement was inaugurated, about either months before then or years before then, depending on which location we're talking about, the yellow times were increased consistent with the California MUTCD.
I understand, but I'm just saying, I understand the process that you've put in place and look at the intersection. I just want to find out, has any alteration to the 32 intersections occurred since this motion was published?
No.
Okay, that's what I want to... Colleagues, I think what's important is that, and I've said it at council meetings, is that we have a responsibility as a city to ensure that we can defend ourselves on these formulas and these issues. We cannot arbitrarily just move them. And I think from looking at the motion, it is way too specific in giving direction to DOT to make changes without consideration of the vehicle code or the uniform standards. And I would say that the people that defend us when we have to go to court about the signalized intersections and the timing is DOT, not citizens from Neighborhood Watch, not people who have hobbies, not people that have made up their own personal study. And the fact that they may not be aware of DOT's formulas doesn't mean they don't exist. And so I think we have to rely on DOT, and I would ask that as we go forward, that DOT constantly looks at these intersections, just as we've asked you to look at left turns and a variety of things to make sure that traffic is in conformance with the law. Otherwise, we have no way to defend ourselves at that next traffic accident that should occur. And this is not a situation that we're playing games with numbers and just arbitrarily pulling them out of our ear. These are based on traffic engineers understanding the city of Los Angeles traffic signaling and the dynamics of our streets, the width, the speed, the intersection, and a variety of things on ped movement. That's why they get paid to do that. And I think we should rely on their understanding and not some of the things that just get thrown out with no justification or documentation. And I certainly don't believe we should be looking at San Jose and a lot of other places that do not have the same traffic congestion or the sophistication of our own traffic lights and signaling that we have here in Los Angeles. So I would hope that as we go forward, we'd ask DOT to continue looking at our intersections, over 4,000 of them, and to make decisions based on the vehicle code and the uniform standards and their expertise on how they signalize this city.
I appreciate that, too, and I think you're right on the mark.
May I address the council in just one question? I asked, is there a list of the 32 intersections that they have addressed that are part of the photo red enforcement, and responded to the city council's query, which is the yellow change interval long enough, and would a delay of the red light cross traffic be a function of safety?
He said that they did not make any changes based on this motion. So since the red lights, signal lights have been in place, they've not altered them, and they've not altered them since then.
But there's a motion before this council to increase the yellow change interval.
That's exactly why I asked him the question. He's not
And what
made
we're
any
going to do at
changes.
this point, we're going to hold this in committee. We're not going to act today.
Yeah, we haven't made that decision
And what
yet.
I'd like you to do, the two of you gentlemen, is articulate in a conversation with Mr. Fisher at another time and see where that takes us, because that's the main reason we're holding the committee, because Mr. Parks' point, and I know Mr. Kreskin is saying, Mr. Weejar is saying it. Go ahead, Mr.
Great. Thank you. Well, on the 32 intersections, how were those 32 intersections selected?
The 32 locations were selected based on a joint evaluation by the police department and DOT. The police department was looking at those locations where either they had the highest number of citations issued or the highest number of correctable accidents. DOT then looked at that list to make sure there were no unusual complex situations which might be difficult for the motorist to interpret, like double intersections, like you might have on Chandler Boulevard, or something unusual of that nature. And then the other consideration was that there had to be a fairly equal number in each of the traffic districts of the LAPD so that their staff could have experience in administering them at the city level and then taking them to the court level. So it was a variety of factors.
Okay, so even if we were to say we wanted to put them in the most dangerous intersections, there was some criteria, but then there was some other flexibility to make sure we spread them out throughout the city, correct?
If you wanted to resume the program.
Now, whether we can or cannot increase the yellow lights, my point being, if we move down this path, we should ask ourselves, okay, do we want to just make changes at those 32 intersections, or if we're really trying to tackle safety throughout the city, let's not look at those 32 intersections. Let's go back, look at those most dangerous intersections, and make adjustments there first. If we want to do a pilot, if we want to test, if we want to find out what works, what doesn't work, I say we don't continue to focus on these 32 intersections, because I don't think we used a process to begin with that we really focused on some of the most dangerous intersections in the city. Am I wrong on that?
We would certainly agree with that approach. Look at the locations through the city that have the highest need, and look at the measures and the toolbox you have to correct those situations.
Thank you, Mr. Reserve, for that. I mean, one thing, just to clarify, because I was sitting on this committee, I think we did not go forward on the worst intersections in the city, but we did go forward on the worst intersections per district. That's why you get up with 2 per district. They were the 2 worst in your district. They may not have been the worst in the city, and they may not have made the top 10 in the city, but they were your worst in your district.
Okay.
Well, I might add that the one in my district of Pico and Centinela, many people who complained to me about that red light they would be making a right-hand turn, and they would come to a stop, but it might not have been a firm stop before they edged out, and many of them felt that it was unfair how that happened, and that brought a lot of attention to that at that point.
And if we're going to hold, this, I don't want to get into a discussion anymore, at least for myself, the questions I have on whether increasing the yellow, timing, et cetera. I mean, I'll hold that till later when we come back.
Great. I appreciate both of my colleagues before Mr. Kretz gets in, who added substance to where we can take this discussion next, and I appreciate both of them. Mr. Kretz.
I'm somewhat in disbelief of what I've heard, and I have to make a couple connections and see if what I'm hearing is right. Although, first of all, I would have to make a correction, because I've heard it said a couple times that we put those countdown signals in every intersection. The last time you said that, as I drove home, I counted a number of them that weren't done. So I can't imagine that my random drive picking up 5 or 6 of them couldn't be replicated throughout the city. So I would only say we've tried to do it at every intersection. I would have to assume we didn't do it very systematically, and we missed a bunch of them.
You tell me where that is, and I'll make sure that it's corrected, because we held a ceremony with the mayor to commemorate the completion of that program. So I don't know if it's on a
At
border.
every intersection, I'll start accumulating a list, and we can go back and do the
together
rest.
with your staff. It could be on a border street. Let's say that might be under the jurisdiction of Beverly Hills, but if you give me the list, we'll certainly check
I
it
can
out.
remember one off the top of my head was near Hamilton High School in Robertson. I can't remember the exact intersection, but nowhere near Beverly Hills, I promise you.
Cattaraugus? Is it Cattaraugus?
Could be.
Cattaraugus and Robertson.
Let me find out.
Now, the thing that has me more in disbelief, if I understood what you just said, is you checked every one of the 32 intersections, and it's basically as safe as it could be based on the signal timing. That there's virtually no trouble in crossing any of those intersections. 99.8%, and I presume that you think that's as good as one could get. And based on that, we shouldn't change the timing on any of these 32 intersections.
I think I said that. We looked at them, and we would have no objective basis for increasing the yellow time or all red time any further based on what we know today. One other thing that we need to mention, that if we were to change it without reason here, then what do we do at the other 4,368 locations we have? I think it's very important that we have a thoughtful practice, but a uniform practice throughout the city to make sure that bike intersections are timed in the same way.
So presumably you're saying if you added 0.3 of a second of yellow, you couldn't get any closer to 100%, that virtually everybody that's going through is getting through the intersection appropriately.
The risk you run in arbitrarily adding time without reason is that motorists could get used to it, have a more casual attitude, run the
If you
yellow.
added red time, you actually
I
think
thought you
people
said add yellow
run
time.
the red portion of a light based on knowing that they have a little extra time?
No, I thought you said yellow.
Well, I said yellow and red.
We're concerned that if we added yellow without reason, it could result in a more casual attitude about, well, I don't really need to stop. I can, but I don't really need to. I'll just go on through. It could encourage people to go faster. it could have a long-term effect. Now, we don't have a study that can measure that, but that's the conventional wisdom within the profession.
Well, here's what astonishes me. So, and I appreciate all my colleagues listening to this, because this is a point that makes no sense to me. We're achieving virtual perfection in terms of being able to get through the light. So we don't think with education and anything else we'd be able to improve it, because we're almost already there. So why did we put red light cameras at these 32 intersections? If we were already there and we got all the safety we possibly could out of it, why did we have red light cameras? And was any improved safety due to red light cameras, or would it just have been that we already have a near perfect timing in yellow and red lights, so virtually no one's running them?
What I indicated is I think we have appropriate timing there. Close to 100% are entering on either the green or the yellow, not 100%. And it's our belief that those 2 out of 10,000 people who enter on the red are doing so either because they're distracted, they're going way too fast, or maybe they don't care.
Do we have any reason to think the presence of red light cameras would have changed any of that?
Our belief is that you need a 3-step approach. You need good enforcement, you need good engineering, you need good education. No matter, even with all the engineering and enforcement that you may have, you're still going to have human beings driving, and human beings will make mistakes from time to time.
Now, the experience of other cities that have been in a similar situation and then have pulled out the red light cameras and added timing is that they found their violations disappeared. Do we have any reason to think that that same thing wouldn't occur in this case?
If we added timing that was not based on a sound reason, just arbitrary, we feel that it could result in a more casual attitude about using the yellow. The yellow is to be respected. It means that if you're at that point where you're too close to stop, you need to know that you can get through safely. If you're far enough where you can stop, you need to know that you can stop comfortably before you reach the intersection. The yellow needs to reflect that. If it's too long, then motorists will not respect it.
Do you see any danger at all in extending the red in all these intersections?
The red needs to be enough to get you through the intersection.
The four-way red. So
the all red. The all red.
But any reason to think that there wouldn't be less conflict by adding a fraction of a second of red?
We believe we have appropriate timing out there. I don't think we have a high rate of running it. If we have an unusual location, if we have a very wide intersection, certainly we should look at the timing there.
And if we didn't have a high rate of running it, why did we have red light cameras?
To try to reinforce good behavior for the small percentage of motorists who disregard it.
I'm sorry. I'm not a transportation expert, and you are, but this seemed like about the most boneheaded reaction of this that I've ever heard. How a red light camera would prevent these kind of interactions, and changing the signal timing wouldn't. When, just by definition, if you have a red and people don't run red lights when they see them, and you had a red in all four directions, how could you not reduce the possibility for collision?
I think the national experience in many cities showed that red light photo enforcement reduced right-angle collisions. Based on the data that the council had available to us, you made a policy decision to discontinue it. That's done. I think, though, that if, again, we increase yellow times arbitrarily, we encourage a less casual or bad behavior if we increase it too much beyond what makes sense.
There's not much I can say.
One
comment about that.
One quick comment,
One
but
quick comment.
remember, this
Okay,
is held in committee and will
Absolutely.
continue a
I
healthy
have
discussion.
I've shown the council that in Fremont, California, they started at the statutory minimum, they increased to 5 seconds, which they increased, whatever criteria they used, whether it was arbitrary or whatever, we don't know. Okay, they have a 45-mile-an-hour approach, that's a 4.3 second. Okay, they increased to 5 seconds, that was the state that increased that time, not the city. There's a red light camera there. The violations went down significantly and stayed down. We will continue to get data month after month after month because they continue to have that camera until they decide that it's not profitable enough and they pull it out. But the fact of the matter is violations went down and they have stayed down. So this idea of that a fraction of a second or a part of a second is somehow people are going to be able to perceive that and say, oh, I no longer need to stop at yellow lights. I think there's no data that shows that. Absolutely no data
Okay,
that shows
thank you
that.
very much. Appreciate everybody's interaction and dialogue, and my colleagues' comments and suggestions as well. Mr. Fisher, for your incredible leadership on this, and we will hold this in committee for further discussion. There are no other public comment cards to go forward. The meeting is adjourned to the Transportation Committee. Thank you all very much for coming.